Welcome to another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. You're listening to a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State, featuring writer, poet, and musician Rick Pidcock. Now here's Rick.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Highest Power Church and State. I'm Rick Pidcock, and today we're going to do something a little different. It is Thanksgiving weekend, and a lot of people are going to be hanging out with family and friends. So I know people are not going to want to spend a lot of time on listening to podcasts, probably. So I'd like to share with you a piece that I wrote a couple years ago. It's called 3 Stories from Jesus About the Danger of Hierarchy and Gratitude. Because we're all talking about how people use hierarchy here to promote the highest power in the church as well as in politics. And especially Thanksgiving, this all gets connected in a lot of evangelical spaces to gratitude and to thankfulness. And that can actually provide a bit of a smokescreen and an extra layer there that can bring harm. Because a lot of people, they kind of see the thankfulness and the gratitude, and they see that as a good thing, and then it keeps them from recognizing how those things are being utilized to justify harming their neighbors. So this will be a bit of a shorter episode. I'm going to read this piece, 3 Stories from Jesus About the Danger of Hierarchy and Gratitude. I wrote it for Baptist News Global on November 22nd, 2022. Remember the parable where Jesus warned against thankfulness in corporate worship? It's a well-known parable in Luke 18, the first in a trilogy of scenes that question our assumptions about status and blessing in relationship with others. In the third scene, Jesus tells a rich ruler to sell all you own and distribute the money to the poor. But the rich ruler sees the blessing of his financial status as something he can't give up in exchange for a lower status. In the second scene, Jesus tells his disciples to let the little children come to me. According to the culture of the Roman Empire, babies were considered to have the lowest social status. So the disciples saw the blessing of their social status as male disciples as a sacralized excuse to sternly order the people not to bring their lower status babies to Jesus. In the first scene, Jesus tells a parable of 2 men going to the temple to pray. During their time of worship, one of them gives thanks, saying, "God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector." The other worshiper stands at a distance, doesn't presume to look up to the place of highest status, beats his breast, and says, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." Jesus responds by saying the second man is justified, while the first is not. He explains, "For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted." Not random scenes. While these 3 stories may appear to be random scenes about Jesus' life, they fit together thematically through their critique of hierarchy. Each story features men who see the world through the lens of hierarchy, with their position being over others. And in the end of each story, each of those men is confronted by Jesus. In each story, Jesus forsakes any claim on the hierarchy he could have and becomes present in and among those lower in the hierarchy. Jesus becomes poor. He embraces the children. And when it comes to thieves, rogues, adulterers, and tax collectors, Jesus doesn't condemn them. He dines with them. His posture toward them is one of hospitality. He reclines on the floor with them, perhaps leaning on a cushion to soften the pressure of the floor on his muscles after a long walk or a hard day's work. He enjoys bread, grains and vegetables, perhaps prepared in stews. During the spring and summer, he likely drinks fresh goat's milk or savors butter, cheese, and honey. Due to an unpredictable climate, he might develop an affection for grapes dried into raisins or get a buzz out of local wines. And perhaps for dessert, he has a weakness for freshly baked fig cakes. But while his body relaxes and he experiences the tastes and aroma of food and drink, he is present to his neighbors. Is Jesus an introvert or an extrovert? Does he quietly prefer the smaller gatherings or feel awkward having that first conversation with a stranger? He has many of the same human conversations we have, asking people about what they do, where they're from, who they love, what things they enjoy. If Jesus is someone people like to hang out with over meals, then he probably likes to laugh, learns to listen, and maybe occasionally cares enough to cry. For him, the blessing isn't in his position over his neighbors, but in his presence with them, in and among their gatherings of embodied hunger, thirst, and filling. Hospitality. In Reaching Out, the three movements of the spiritual life, Henry Nouwen says, quote, "Hospitality means primarily the creation of a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them a space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom, not disturbed by dividing lines. It is not to lead our neighbor into a corner where there are no alternatives left, but to open a wide spectrum of options for choice commitment. It is not an educated intimidation with good books, good stories, and good works, but the liberation of fearful hearts so that words can find roots and bear ample fruit." Nouwen adds, quote, "The paradox of hospitality is that it wants to create emptiness, not a fearful emptiness, but a friendly emptiness, where strangers can enter and discover themselves as created free to sing their own songs, speak their own languages, dance their own dances, free also to leave and follow their own vocations. Hospitality is not a subtle invitation to adopt the lifestyle of the host, but the gift of a chance for the guest to find his own." Unquote. Jesus saw blessing as the presence of God's hospitality toward us that frees us to give space for our social hierarchies to be deconstructed and our inner posture toward one another to open. In his presence, the rich and poor, the old and young, the worshiper and the adulterer could have a meal together, move toward one another, and see what happens. What we worship. This is not the case in too much of our worship today. In our society, male worshipers are promoting the criminalization of adulterers. Male school principals are justifying the violence of spanking kids at school. Male pastors are promoting the violence of owning women and children, and male executives are building generational wealth on the backs of Black and Hispanic women. In many cases, our worship gatherings have promoted politics and power rather than liberation and love. One way this happens is in the lyrics we use when we talk about ourselves. Like the worshiper Jesus spoke about, we gather at our places of worship to thank God that we are no longer slaves, no longer blind, no longer worthy of eternal damnation. But what we don't realize is that when we frame our past with these images, we're framing our non-evangelical neighbors present with these images. We are, in effect, telling them that they are slaves, they are blind, they are worthy of being damned forever. We're setting our status above them, and we don't recognize the hierarchy we're forming because we think we're being thankful for how blessed we are. By saying, "God, I thank you that I'm no longer who I was," our subconscious mind is saying, "God, I thank you that I'm not like them." And that's the exact hierarchy that Jesus was subverting. How would our worship look if rather than seeing blessing as reflecting the words and power values of hierarchical men, we reflected the actions and presence values of Jesus, who created a friendly emptiness where strangers can enter and discover themselves as created free to sing their own songs, speak their own languages, dance their own dances. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll be back with another episode on Monday.
This has been another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. The episode you've just heard is part of a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State. Be sure to follow BNG daily at baptistnews.com and subscribe to get notifications about future episodes. Baptist News Global is a national nonprofit news service that is independent, free, and faithful. BNG is supported by readers and listeners like you. Learn more at baptistnews.com.
This episode was produced and edited by Mac Bowles of TKG Communications, LLC, Dallas, Texas.